Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 3 of our complete practice question series for the CLF-C02 AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends, then review the correct answer, explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 3. Question number 124. An organization has a set of e-commerce applications. The applications must be able to send messages to one another. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A, AWS Auto-Scaling. Option B, Elastic Load Balancing. Option C, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. Option D, Amazon Kinesis Data Streams. The correct answer is C, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. Here is why. Amazon SQS provides managed message queues that let distributed applications exchange messages asynchronously. Why are the other options not correct? Auto-scaling adjusts compute capacity. B. Elastic load balancing distributes incoming traffic across targets. D. Kinesis data streams ingests and processes real-time streaming data. Exam tip. Use SQS to decouple applications through durable asynchronous message queues. Question number 125. What responsibility belongs to AWS when a company hosts its databases on Amazon EC2 instances? Option A, database backups. Option B, database software patches. Option C, operating system patches. Option D, operating system installations. The correct answer is D, operating system installations. Here is why. The intended answer treats AWS as providing the initial operating system environment for an EC2 instance. Customers manage the guest OS after deployment. Why are the other options not correct? A. Customers configure and manage backups for databases hosted on EC2. B. Customers patch database software that they install and operate on EC2. C. Customers are responsible for guest operating system updates and security patches. Exam tip. For EC2, customers manage the guest OS, applications, data, and backup strategy. Question number 126. Which of the following are advantages of moving to the AWS cloud? Choose 2. Option A, the ability to turn over the responsibility for all security to AWS. Option B, the ability to use the pay-as-you-go model. Option C, the ability to have full control over the physical infrastructure. Option D, no longer having to guess what capacity will be required. E, no longer worrying about users' access controls. The correct answer is B, the ability to use the pay-as-you-go model. D, no longer having to guess what capacity will be required. Here is why. AWS provides usage-based pricing and elastic capacity that can adjust as workload demand changes. Why are the other options not correct? A. Customers retain security responsibilities under the shared responsibility model. C. AWS controls and maintains the physical infrastructure. E. Customers remain responsible for identity and access management. Exam tip. AWS reduces capacity guessing but does not remove customer security responsibilities. Question number 127. What tool should a developer use to integrate AWS service features directly into an application? Option A, AWS Software Development Kit. Option B, AWS Code Deploy. Option C, AWS Lambda. Option D, AWS Batch. The correct answer is A, AWS Software Development Kit. Here is why. AWS SDKs provide language-specific libraries for calling AWS service APIs directly from application code. Why are the other options not correct? B. Code Deploy automates application deployments. C. Lambda runs event-driven code. D. AWS Batch schedules and runs batch computing jobs. Exam tip. Use an AWS SDK to integrate AWS service features into application code. Question number 128. Using AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM, To grant access only to the resources needed to perform a task is known as Option A, restricted access. Option B, as needed access. Option C, least privilege access. Option D, token access. The correct answer is C, least privilege access. Here is why. Least privilege grants only the permissions required to perform an authorized task. Why are the other options not correct? A restricted access is not the formal IAM principle described. B, as needed access is not the standard AWS term. D, token access refers to credentials rather than permission scope. Exam tip. Least privilege means granting only the necessary actions on necessary resources. Question number 129. How can AWS cloud computing help businesses reduce costs? Choose 2. Option A. AWS charges the same prices for services in every AWS region. Option B. AWS enables capacity to be adjusted on demand. Option C. AWS offers discounts for Amazon EC2 instances that remain idle for more than 1 week. Option D. AWS does not charge for data sent from the AWS cloud to the internet. E. AWS eliminates many of the costs of building and maintaining on-premises data centers. The correct answer is B. AWS enables capacity to be adjusted on demand. E. AWS eliminates many costs of building and maintaining on-premises data centers. Here is why. Elastic capacity reduces over-provisioning, while AWS removes much of the expense of owning and operating physical data centers. Why are the other options not correct? AWS prices can vary by region. C. AWS does not provide discounts merely because an EC2 instance remains idle. D. Data transfer from AWS to the internet can incur charges. Exam tip. AWS reduces costs through elastic capacity and less data center ownership. Question number 130. What tasks are the customer's responsibility under the AWS shared responsibility model? Choose 2. Option A. Establish the global infrastructure. Option B. Perform client-side data encryption. Option C. Configure IAM credentials. Option D. Secure edge locations. E. Patch Amazon RDS-DB instances. The correct answer is B. Perform client-side data encryption. C. Configure IAM credentials. Here is why. Customers protect their data and configure the identities and credentials that access AWS resources. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS establishes and operates its global infrastructure. D. AWS secures its edge locations. E. AWS patches the managed Amazon RDS database infrastructure. Exam tip. Customers manage data protection and identities. AWS manages physical infrastructure. Question number 131. An organization plans to deploy containers on AWS. The company wants full control over the compute resources that host the containers. Which AWS service can satisfy these requirements? Option A. Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service. Amazon EKS. Option B. AWS Fargate. Option C. Amazon EC2. Option D. Amazon Elastic Container Service. Amazon ECS. The correct answer is C. Amazon EC2. Here is why. Amazon EC2 gives the company control over the virtual machines that host and run its containers. Why are the other options not correct? Amazon EKS manages Kubernetes, but can use different compute options. B. Fargate removes the need to manage container host infrastructure. D. Amazon ECS orchestrates containers but does not itself require full host control. Exam tip. Use EC2 when container workloads require control of the underlying compute instances. Question number 132. An organization is assessing its AWS business support plan to determine if the plan still meets the company's needs. The company is considering switching to AWS enterprise support. What additional benefit will the company receive with AWS Enterprise Support? Option A. A full set of AWS Trusted Advisor checks. Option B. Phone, email, and chat access to cloud support engineers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Option C. A designated technical account manager, TAM, to assist in monitoring and optimization. Option D. A consultative review and architecture guidance for the company's applications. The correct answer is C. A designated technical account manager, TAM. Here is why. AWS Enterprise Support includes a designated TAM who provides proactive guidance, optimization assistance, and operational support. Why are the other options not correct? A full trusted advisor checks were already available with the referenced business plan. B. The referenced business plan already included 24-hour technical support channels. D. Architecture guidance was not the unique enterprise benefit among these options. Exam tip. A designated TAM is the key enterprise support distinction in legacy exam questions. Question number 133. An organization needs to evaluate its AWS environment and provide best practice recommendations in 5 categories: cost, performance, service, limits, fault tolerance, and security. What AWS service can the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Shield. Option B. AWS WAF. Option C. AWS Trusted Advisor. Option D. AWS Service Catalog. The correct answer is C. AWS Trusted Advisor. Here is why. Trusted Advisor evaluates AWS environments and provides recommendations across cost, performance, security, resilience, and service quotas. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS Shield provides DDoS protection. B. AWS WAF filters supported web requests. D. Service Catalog distributes and governs approved cloud products. Exam tip. Trusted Advisor reviews AWS environments against operational best practices. Question number 134. What pricing model will interrupt a running Amazon EC2 instance if capacity becomes temporarily unavailable? Option A. On-demand instances. Option B. Standard reserved instances. Option C. Spot instances. Option D. Convertible reserved instances. The correct answer is C. Spot instances. Here is why. Spot instances use spare EC2 capacity and can be interrupted when AWS needs the capacity back. Why are the other options not correct? On-demand instances are not interrupted because of spot capacity availability. B. Standard reserved instances provide discounts for committed usage. D. Convertible reserved instances allow attribute exchanges within applicable conditions. Exam tip. Spot offers deep discounts but requires workloads that can tolerate interruption. Question number 135. What options are AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF, Security Perspective capabilities? Choose 2. Option A. Observability. Option B. Incident and problem management. Option C. Incident response. Option D. Infrastructure protection. E. Availability and continuity. The correct answer is C. Incident response. D. Infrastructure protection. Here is why. Incident response and infrastructure protection are capabilities of the AWS CAF security perspective. Why are the other options not correct? Observability belongs to the operations perspective. B. Incident and problem management belongs to the operations perspective. E. Availability and continuity belongs to the operations perspective. Exam tip. AWS CAF security covers protection, detection, identity, and incident response. Question number 136. An organization needs to grant users in one AWS account access to resources in another AWS account. The users do not currently have permission to access the resources. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A. IAM Group. Option B. IAM Role. Option C, IAM tag. Option D, IAM access analyzer. The correct answer is B, IAM role. Here is why. Users can assume a cross-account IAM role to receive temporary permissions for resources in another AWS account. Why are the other options not correct? A. An IAM group organizes users within an account. C. IAM tags provide metadata and can support policy conditions. D. IAM Access Analyzer identifies external, internal, or unused access. Exam tip. Use IAM roles for temporary and cross-account AWS access. Question number 137. An organization needs to migrate its on-premises workloads to the AWS cloud. The company needs to separate workloads for chargeback to different departments. What AWS services or features can satisfy these requirements? Choose 2. Option A, placement groups. Option B, consolidated billing. Option C, edge locations. Option D, AWS config. E, multiple AWS accounts. The correct answer is B, consolidated billing. E, multiple AWS accounts. Here is why. Separate accounts isolate departmental workloads, while consolidated billing combines charges for centralized payment and reporting. Why are the other options not correct? Placement groups control EC2 instance placement. C. Edge locations deliver services closer to users. D. AWS config tracks resource configurations and compliance. Exam tip. Use separate accounts for workload isolation and consolidated billing for central costs. Question number 138. What AWS services can a company use to achieve a loosely coupled architecture? Choose 2. Option A, Amazon Workspaces. Option B, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. Option C, Amazon Connect. Option D, AWS Trusted Advisor. E, AWS Step Functions. The correct answer is B, Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS. E, AWS Step Functions. Here is why. SQS decouples components with message queues, while Step Functions coordinates distributed services through managed workflows. Why are the other options not correct? Workspaces provides managed virtual desktops. C. Amazon Connect is a cloud contact center service. D. Trusted Advisor provides best practice recommendations. Exam tip. SQS decouples messaging. Step Functions coordinates distributed application workflows. Question number 139. An organization has migrated its workloads to AWS. The company needs to adopt AWS at scale and operate more efficiently and securely. Which AWS service or framework should the company use for operational support? Option A, AWS Support. Option B, AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF. Option C, AWS Managed Services, AMS. Option D, AWS Well-Architected Framework. The correct answer is C, AWS Managed Services, AMS. Here is why. AMS provides operational support to help organizations adopt AWS at scale and operate efficiently and securely. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS support provides technical guidance rather than managed cloud operations. B. AWS CAF guides organizational cloud transformation and capability development. D. Well-architected evaluates workload design against architectural best practices. Exam tip. AMS operates AWS environments. AWS CAF guides transformation. Question number 140. An organization wants a time series database service that makes it easier to store and analyze trillions of events each day. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A, Amazon Neptune. Option B, Amazon TimeStream. Option C, Amazon Forecast. Option D, Amazon DocumentDB with MongoDB compatibility. correct answer is B. Amazon TimeStream. Here is why. Amazon TimeStream is a managed time series database designed to store and analyze trillions of time series events. Why are the other options not correct? Neptune is a graph database. C. Amazon Forecast generated time series forecasts rather than storing operational events. D. DocumentDB is a document database compatible with MongoDB workloads. Exam tip. TimeStream is purpose-built for large-scale time series data. Question number 141. What AWS service can a company use to visually design and build serverless applications? Option A. AWS Lambda. Option B. AWS Batch. Option C. AWS Application Composer. Option D. AWS App Runner. The correct answer is C. AWS Application Composer. Here is why. Application Composer, now AWS Infrastructure Composer, visually designs and builds serverless and modern applications. Why are the other options not correct? Lambda runs serverless functions but is not the visual application design tool. B. AWS Batch runs batch computing jobs. D. App Runner deploys containerized web applications and APIs. Exam tip. AWS Application Composer was renamed AWS Infrastructure Composer. Question number 142. An organization needs to run its workload on Amazon EC2 instances for more than 1 year. This workload will run continuously. What option offers a discounted hourly rate compared to the hourly rate of on-demand instances? Option A. AWS Graviton Processor. Option B. Dedicated hosts. Option C. EC2 Instance Savings Plans. Option D. Amazon EC2 Auto-Scaling Instances. The correct answer is C. EC2 Instance Savings Plans. Here is why. EC2 Instance Savings Plans reduce hourly compute prices in exchange for a consistent 1-year or 3-year usage commitment. Why are the other options not correct? A Graviton is a processor family, not a purchasing commitment. B. Dedicated hosts address physical isolation and licensing. D. Auto-scaling adjusts instance capacity but is not a discounted pricing model. Exam tip. Savings plans discount predictable continuous compute usage through a commitment. Question number 143. An organization plans to migrate to the AWS cloud. The company needs to use the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF, to define and track business outcomes as part of its cloud transformation journey. What AWS CAF governance perspective capability can satisfy these requirements? Option A. Benefits management. Option B. Risk management. Option C. Application portfolio management. Option D. Cloud financial management. The correct answer is A. Benefits management. Here is why. Benefits management defines, tracks, and realizes measurable business outcomes from cloud transformation investments. Why are the other options not correct? B. Risk management identifies and treats organizational risks. C. Application portfolio management governs and rationalizes application investments. D. Cloud financial management plans and controls cloud-related costs. Exam tip. Benefits management connects cloud initiatives to measurable business outcomes. Question number 144. An organization needs to quickly and securely move files over long distances between its client and an Amazon S3 bucket. What S3 feature can satisfy this requirement? Option A. S3 versioning. Option B. S3 transfer acceleration. Option C. S3 ACLs. Option D. S3 intelligent tiering. The correct answer is B. S3 transfer acceleration. Here is why. S3 transfer acceleration uses AWS Edge locations and the AWS Global Network to speed long-distance file transfers. Why are the other options not correct? A versioning preserves multiple versions of objects. C. S3 ACLs control object or bucket access. D. Intelligent tiering optimizes storage costs based on access patterns. Exam tip. Use S3 transfer acceleration for faster long-distance transfers to an S3 bucket. Question number 145. An organization needs to continuously run an experimental workload on an Amazon EC2 instance and stop the instance after 12 hours. What instance purchasing option can satisfy this requirement most cost-effectively? Option A, on-demand instances. Option B, reserved instances. Option C, spot instances. Option D, dedicated instances. The correct answer is A, on-demand instances. Here is why. On-demand instances suit a short 12-hour workload that must run continuously and requires no long-term commitment. Why are the other options not correct? B, reserved instances require a longer commitment than this temporary workload. C, spot instances can be interrupted before the required 12 hours are complete. D, dedicated instances add isolation and cost that the workload does not require. Exam tip. Use on-demand for short, non-interruptible workloads without a usage commitment. Question number 146. What cloud transformation journey phase of the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF, focuses on demonstrating how the cloud helps accelerate business outcomes? Option A, scale. Option B, envision. Option C, align. Option D, launch. The correct answer is B, envision. Here is why. The envision phase demonstrates how cloud adoption can accelerate business outcomes and identifies transformation opportunities. Why are the other options not correct? Scale expands successful initiatives and transformation across the organization. C, align identifies capability gaps and creates an action plan. D, launch delivers pilot initiatives and incremental business value. Exam tip. Envision defines outcomes. Align finds gaps. Launch pilots. Scale expands. Question number 147. What option is a customer responsibility under the AWS shared responsibility model? Option A, maintenance of underlying hardware of Amazon EC2 instances. Option B, application data security. Option C, physical security of data centers. Option D, maintenance of VPC components. The correct answer is B, application data security. Here is why. Customers are responsible for protecting their application data, permissions, and security configurations. Why are the other options not correct? AWS maintains the underlying EC2 hardware. C, AWS provides physical security for its data centers. D, AWS maintains the underlying managed VPC infrastructure. Exam tip. Customers secure their data and configurations. AWS secures physical infrastructure. Question number 148. An organization wants its Amazon EC2 instances to operate in a highly available environment, even if there is a natural disaster in a particular geographic area. What approach will achieve this goal? Option A, use EC2 instances in multiple AWS regions. Option B, use EC2 instances in multiple Amazon CloudFront locations. Option C, use EC2 instances in multiple edge locations. Option D, use EC2 instances in AWS local zones. The correct answer is A, use EC2 instances in multiple AWS regions. Here is why. Deploying across regions provides geographic separation if a natural disaster affects an entire area. Why are the other options not correct? B, CloudFront locations do not host general-purpose EC2 instances. C, edge locations deliver edge services rather than standard EC2 workloads. D, local zones remain associated with a parent region and serve local latency needs. Exam tip. Use multiple regions for resilience against a large geographic disruption. Question number 149. An organization needs to modernize and convert a monolithic application into microservices. The company needs to move the application to AWS. What migration strategy should the company use? Option A, rehost. Option B, replatform. Option C, repurchase. Option D, refactor. The correct answer is D, refactor. Here is why. Refactoring redesigns an application to use cloud-native architectures, such as converting a monolith into microservices. Why are the other options not correct? A rehosting moves the application with minimal changes. B, replatforming makes limited optimizations without major redesign. C, repurchasing replaces the application with another product. Exam tip. Refactor when migration includes substantial architectural modernization. Question number 150. A systems administrator created a new IAM user for a developer and assigned the user an access key instead of a username and password. What is the access key used for? Option A, to access the AWS account as the AWS account root user. Option B, to access the AWS account through the AWS Management Console. Option C, to access the AWS account through a CLI. Option D, to access all of a company's AWS accounts. The correct answer is C, to access the AWS account through a CLI. Here is why. An IAM access key signs programmatic requests made through the AWS CLI, APIs, or SDKs. Why are the other options not correct? A, an IAM user's access key does not provide root user access. B, console access normally uses a sign-in identity and password or federation. D, the key grants only the permissions assigned to that IAM identity. Exam tip. Access keys enable programmatic access. Passwords or federation enable console access. Question number 151. An organization is moving an on-premises data center to the AWS cloud. The company must migrate 50 petabytes of file storage data to AWS, with the least possible operational overhead. What AWS service or resource should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A, AWS Snowmobile. Option B, AWS Snowball Edge. Option C, AWS Data Exchange. Option D, AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS. The correct answer is A, AWS Snowmobile. Here is why. Snowmobile was designed to transfer extremely large datasets, up to 100 PB per device, with less device management overhead than many Snowball appliances. Why are the other options not correct? B, Snowball Edge would require many individual devices for a 50 PB migration. C, AWS Data Exchange provides access to third-party datasets. D, AWS DMS migrates databases, not general petabyte-scale file storage. Exam tip. Historical questions used Snowmobile for tens of petabytes of offline transfer. Question number 152. An organization has an application with robust hardware requirements. The application must be accessed by students who are using lightweight, low-cost laptops. What AWS service will help the company deploy the application without investing in back-end infrastructure or high-end client hardware? Option A, Amazon AppStream 2.0. Option B, AWS AppSync. Option C, Amazon WorkLink. Option D, AWS Elastic Beanstalk. The correct answer is A, Amazon AppStream 2.0. Here is why. AppStream 2.0, now Amazon Workspaces applications, streams demanding desktop applications to users through lightweight client devices. Why are the other options not correct? B, AppSync provides managed GraphQL and event APIs. C, WorkLink was for secure mobile access to internal websites and is no longer available. D, Elastic Beanstalk deploys web applications but does not stream desktop applications. Exam tip. Workspaces applications, formerly AppStream 2.0, streams applications from AWS. Question number 153. An organization needs to automatically add and remove Amazon EC2 instances. The company wants the EC2 instances to adjust to varying workloads dynamically. What service or feature can satisfy these requirements? Option A, Amazon DynamoDB. Option B, Amazon EC2 Spot instances. Option C, AWS Snow family. Option D, Amazon EC2 autoscaling. The correct answer is D, Amazon EC2 autoscaling. Here is why. EC2 autoscaling automatically adds or removes instances as workload demand changes. Why are the other options not correct? A, DynamoDB is a managed NoSQL database. B, Spot instances are a discounted EC2 purchasing option. C, AWS Snow family supports data transfer and edge workloads. Exam tip: EC2 autoscaling dynamically adjusts instance capacity to match demand. Question number 154. A user needs to securely automate the management and rotation of credentials that are shared between applications, while spending the least amount of time on managing tasks. What AWS service or feature can be used to accomplish this? Option A, AWS Cloud HSM. Option B, AWS Key Management Service. AWS KMS. Option C, AWS Secrets Manager. Option D, server-side encryption. The correct answer is C, AWS Secrets Manager. Here is why. Secrets Manager securely stores shared credentials and automates their scheduled rotation with minimal administration. Why are the other options not correct? A, Cloud HSM provides dedicated hardware security modules. B, AWS KMS manages encryption keys rather than application credentials. D, server-side encryption protects stored data but does not rotate credentials. Exam tip: use Secrets Manager when application secrets require managed storage and rotation. Question number 155. What security service automatically recognizes and classifies sensitive data or intellectual property on AWS? Option A, Amazon GuardDuty. Option B, Amazon Macie. Option C, Amazon Inspector. Option D, AWS Shield. The correct answer is B, Amazon Macie. Here is why. Amazon Macie uses automated discovery and classification to identify sensitive data stored in Amazon S3. Why are the other options not correct? GuardDuty detects threats from supported data sources. C, Inspector scans supported workloads for vulnerabilities. D, AWS Shield provides DDoS protection. Exam tip: Macie discovers sensitive S3 data. GuardDuty detects threats. Question number 156. What actions are best practices for an AWS account root user? Choose 2. Option A, share root user credentials with team members. Option B, create multiple root users for the account, separated by environment. Option C, enable multi-factor authentication, MFA, on the root user. Option D, create an IAM user with administrator privileges for daily administrative tasks, instead of using the root user. E, use programmatic access instead of the root user and password. The correct answer is C, enable multi-factor authentication, MFA, on the root user. D, create an IAM administrator for daily administrative tasks. Here is why. MFA strengthens root authentication, and using another administrative identity reduces routine exposure of unrestricted root credentials. Why are the other options not correct? A root credentials must never be shared. B, an AWS account has only one root user. E, root programmatic access keys increase risk and should not be used routinely. Exam tip: protect root with MFA and use non-root identities for everyday administration. Question number 157. An organization is running a critical workload on an Amazon RDS DB instance. The company needs the DB instance to be highly available with a recovery time of less than 5 minutes. What solution can satisfy these requirements? Option A, create a red replica of the DB instance. Option B, create a template of the DB instance by using AWS CloudFormation. Option C. Take frequent snapshots of the DB instance. Store the snapshots in Amazon S3. Option D. Modify the DB instance to be a multi-availability zone deployment. The correct answer is D. Modify the DB instance to be a multi-availability zone deployment. Here is why. Our DS multi-availability zone maintains a synchronous standby and supports automatic failover for high availability. Why are the other options not correct? A read replica primarily supports read scaling and does not provide the same automatic failover. B. A cloud formation template does not provide runtime database availability. C. Restoring a snapshot takes longer and is not an automatic high availability solution. Exam tip. Use our DS multi-availability zone for automatic failover. Use read replicas primarily for read scaling. Question number 158. An organization plans to migrate its application to AWS and run the application on Amazon EC2 instances. The application will have continuous usage for 1 year. What EC2 instance purchasing option can satisfy these requirements most cost-effectively? Option A. Reserved instances. Option B. Spot instances. Option C. On-demand instances. Option D. Dedicated hosts. The correct answer is A. Reserved instances. Here is why. Reserved instances reduce EC2 cost for predictable, continuous usage with a 1-year commitment. Why are the other options not correct? B. Spot instances can be interrupted. C. On-demand instances require no commitment but usually cost more for sustained usage. D. Dedicated hosts address licensing or physical isolation requirements. Exam tip. Use commitment-based pricing for predictable, continuous EC2 workloads. Question number 159. An organization needs to transfer data between an Amazon S3 bucket and an on-premises application. Who is responsible for the security of this data under the AWS shared responsibility model? Option A. The company. Option B. AWS. Option C. Firewall vendor. Option D. AWS marketplace partner. The correct answer is A. The company. Here is why. Customers remain responsible for protecting their data, including data transferred between on-premises applications and AWS. Why are the other options not correct? B. AWS secures the cloud infrastructure, but does not assume ownership of customer data security. C. A firewall vendor does not own the customer's AWS data protection responsibility. D. An AWS marketplace partner is not responsible unless separately contracted for that task. Exam tip. Customers are always responsible for their data and appropriate access controls. Question number 160. What pillar of the AWS well-architected framework refers to the ability of a system to recover from infrastructure or service disruptions and dynamically acquire computing resources to meet demand? Option A. Security. Option B. Reliability. Option C. Performance efficiency. Option D. Cost optimization. The correct answer is B. Reliability. Here is why. Reliability covers recovery from disruptions and dynamically acquiring resources to meet changing demand. Why are the other options not correct? Security focuses on protecting information, systems, and assets. C. Performance efficiency focuses on efficient selection and use of computing resources. D. Cost optimization focuses on avoiding unnecessary spending. Exam tip. Reliability includes recovery from failure and adapting capacity to workload demand. Question number 161. An organization needs to identify Amazon S3 buckets that are shared with another AWS account. What AWS service or feature can satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Lake Formation. Option B. IAM Credential Report. Option C. Amazon Cloud Watch. Option D. IAM Access Analyzer. The correct answer is D. IAM Access Analyzer. Here is why. IAM Access Analyzer identifies S3 buckets and other resources that permit access from outside the defined trust boundary. Why are the other options not correct? Lake formation governs access to data lakes. B. An IAM credential report audits IAM user credentials. C. CloudWatch monitors metrics, logs, and alarms. Exam tip. Use IAM Access Analyzer to identify resources shared with external accounts. Question number 162. What AWS service gives users the ability to build interactive business intelligence dashboards that include machine learning insights? Option A. Amazon Athena. Option B. Amazon Kendra. Option C. Amazon QuickSight. Option D. Amazon Redshift. The correct answer is C. Amazon QuickSight. Here is why. Amazon QuickSight, now Amazon QuickSight within Amazon Quick, creates interactive business intelligence dashboards with machine learning insights. Why are the other options not correct? Athena runs serverless SQL queries against data in Amazon S3. B. Kendra provides intelligent enterprise search. D. Redshift is a managed data warehouse. Exam tip. QuickSight provides dashboards and Visual BI. Redshift provides data warehousing. Question number 163. What action is a security best practice for access to sensitive data that is stored in an Amazon S3 bucket? Option A. Enable S3 cross-region replication, CRR, on the S3 bucket. Option B. Use IAM roles for applications that require access to the S3 bucket. Option C. Configure AWS WAF to prevent unauthorized access to the S3 bucket. Option D. Configure Amazon Guard Duty to prevent unauthorized access to the S3 bucket. The correct answer is B. Use IAM roles for applications that require access to the S3 bucket. Here is why. IAM roles provide temporary credentials and allow applications to receive only the S3 permissions they require. Why are the other options not correct? Cross-region replication improves data resilience, not access authorization. C. AWS WAF filters supported web requests and does not directly authorize S3 access. D. Guard Duty detects threats but does not grant or prevent direct bucket access. Exam tip. Use IAM roles and least privilege policies for application access to Amazon S3. Question number 164. An organization needs a central user portal so that users can log in to third-party business applications that support security assertion markup. Language SAML 2.0. What AWS service can satisfy this requirement? Option A. AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM. Option B. Amazon Cognito. Option C. AWS IAM Identity Center, AWS Single Sign-On. Option D. AWS CLI. The correct answer is C. AWS IAM Identity Center, AWS Single Sign-On. Here is why. IAM Identity Center provides a central access portal and supports SAML 2.0 business application integrations. Why are the other options not correct? IAM manages AWS identities and permissions, but is not the central workforce application portal. B. Cognito provides identity services mainly for customer-facing web and mobile applications. D. AWS CLI provides command line access to AWS services. Exam tip. IAM Identity Center provides workforce single sign-on to accounts and applications. Question number 165. What AWS cloud service can send alerts to customers if custom spending thresholds are exceeded? Option A. AWS Budgets. Option B. AWS Cost Explorer. Option C. AWS Cost Allocation Tags. Option D. AWS Organizations. The correct answer is A. AWS Budgets. Here is why. AWS Budgets sends notifications when actual or forecasted spending exceeds custom thresholds. Why are the other options not correct? B. Cost Explorer analyzes cost and usage trends. C. Cost allocation tags categorize costs. D. Organizations centrally manages multiple AWS accounts. Exam tip. Budgets alerts on thresholds. Cost Explorer analyzes spending trends. Question number 166. What characteristic of the AWS cloud helps users eliminate underutilized CPU capacity? Option A. Agility. Option B. Elasticity. Option C. Reliability. Option D. Durability. The correct answer is B. Elasticity. Here is why. Elasticity removes unnecessary capacity when demand decreases, reducing underutilized CPU resources. Why are the other options not correct? Agility is the ability to provision and experiment rapidly. C. Reliability is the ability to operate and recover from failures. D. Durability concerns long-term preservation of data. Exam tip. Elasticity adds or removes capacity as demand changes. Question number 167. What option is a shared control between AWS and the customer under the AWS shared responsibility model? Option A. Configuration management. Option B. Physical and environmental controls. Option C. Data integrity authentication. Option D. Identity and access management. The correct answer is A. Configuration management. Here is why. AWS configures its infrastructure, while customers configure operating systems, applications, and cloud resources under their control. Why are the other options not correct? B. Physical and environmental controls are inherited from AWS. C. Data integrity authentication is primarily a customer-specific control. D. Customers manage identities and access to their AWS resources. Exam tip. Shared controls apply separately to AWS infrastructure and customer-managed resources. Question number 168. An organization is planning to migrate its application to the AWS cloud. What AWS tool or set of resources should the company use to analyze and assess its readiness for migration? Option A. AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF. Option B. AWS Pricing Calculator. Option C. AWS Well-Architected Framework. Option D. AWS Budgets. The correct answer is A. AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, AWS CAF. Here is why. AWS CAF helps organizations assess cloud readiness, identify capability gaps, and plan cloud transformation. Why are the other options not correct? B. Pricing Calculator estimates planned AWS costs. C. Well-architected reviews workload architecture against design best practices. D. AWS budgets tracks cost and usage thresholds. Exam tip. Use AWS CAF for organizational cloud readiness and transformation planning. Question number 169. An organization plans to migrate to the AWS cloud. The company is gathering information about its on-premises infrastructure and requires information such as the host name, IP address, and MAC address. What AWS service can satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Data Sync. Option B. AWS Application Migration Service. Option C. AWS Application Discovery Service. Option D. AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS. The correct answer is C. AWS Application Discovery Service. Here is why. Application Discovery Service collects on-premises system information such as host names, IP addresses, and MAC addresses for migration planning. Why are the other options not correct? Data Sync transfers files and object data. B. Application Migration Service performs lift and shift server migration. D. AWS DMS migrates supported databases. Exam tip. Discovery Service inventories on-premises servers before migration. Question number 170. What AWS service should users use to learn about AWS service availability and operations? Option A. Amazon Event Bridge. Option B, AWS Service Catalog. Option C, AWS Control Tower. Option D, AWS Health Dashboard. The correct answer is D, AWS Health Dashboard. Here is why. AWS Health Dashboard reports AWS service availability and events that can affect customer resources and operations. Why are the other options not correct? Event Bridge routes application and service events. B. Service Catalog distributes approved cloud products. C. Control Tower establishes and governs multi-account environments. Exam tip. AWS Health reports service events. Cloud Watch monitors customer workloads. Question number 171. What AWS services or features enable users to connect on-premises networks to a VPC? Choose 2. Option A, AWS VPN. Option B, Elastic Load Balancing. Option C, AWS Direct Connect. Option D, VPC peering. E, Amazon CloudFront. The correct answer is A, AWS VPN. C, AWS Direct Connect. Here is why. AWS VPN provides encrypted connectivity over the internet, while Direct Connect provides dedicated private connectivity to AWS. Why are the other options not correct? B, Elastic Load Balancing distributes application traffic. D, VPC peering connects VPCs rather than an on-premises network directly. E, CloudFront is a content delivery network. Exam tip. VPN connects over the internet. Direct Connect provides dedicated connectivity. Question number 172. What AWS service or feature can a company use to apply security rules to specific Amazon EC2 instances? Option A, Network ACLs. Option B, Security Groups. Option C, AWS Trusted Advisor. Option D, AWS WAF. The correct answer is B, Security Groups. Here is why. Security groups are stateful virtual firewalls applied to specific EC2 instances or network interfaces. Why are the other options not correct? Network ACLs apply stateless rules at the subnet boundary. C, Trusted Advisor provides best practice recommendations. D, AWS WAF filters supported web application requests. Exam tip. Security groups protect resources. Network ACLs protect subnets. Question number 173. What design principles support the reliability pillar of the AWS well-architected framework? Choose 2. Option A, perform operations as code. Option B, enable traceability. Option C, automatically scale to meet demand. Option D, deploy resources globally to improve response time. E, automatically recover from failure. The correct answer is C, automatically scale to meet demand. E, automatically recover from failure. Here is why. Reliability designs adapt capacity to changing demand and automate recovery when failures occur. Why are the other options not correct? Performing operations as code is an operational excellence principle. B, traceability is associated with the security pillar. D, global deployment for response time primarily addresses performance and latency. Exam tip. Reliable workloads adjust capacity and recover automatically from failures. Question number 174. An organization needs to create templates that the company can reuse to deploy multiple AWS resources. What AWS service or feature can the company use to satisfy this requirement? Option A, AWS Marketplace. Option B, Amazon Machine Image, AMI. Option C, AWS Cloud Formation. Option D, AWS OpsWorks. The correct answer is C, AWS Cloud Formation. Here is why. Cloud Formation uses reusable templates to provision and manage multiple AWS resources consistently. Why are the other options not correct? Marketplace provides third-party software and services. B. An AMI defines an EC2 machine image rather than a complete multi-resource environment. D. OpsWorks provides configuration management for supported workloads. Exam tip. Cloud formation templates define repeatable multi-resource infrastructure as code. Question number 175. What AWS service or feature is a browser-based, pre-authenticated service that can be launched directly from the AWS Management Console? Option A. AWS API. Option B. AWS Lightsail. Option C. AWS Cloud 9. Option D. AWS Cloud Shell. The correct answer is D. AWS Cloud Shell. Here is why. Cloud Shell is a browser-based, pre-authenticated shell launched from the AWS Management Console. Why are the other options not correct? A. AWS APIs provide programmatic service operations. B. Lightsail provides simplified cloud compute and application resources. C. Cloud9 is a cloud-based development environment. Exam tip. Cloud Shell provides ready-to-use AWS command line access in a browser. Question number 176. An organization needs to migrate its database to a managed AWS service that is compatible with PostgreSQL. What AWS services can satisfy these requirements? Choose 2. Option A. Amazon Athena. Option B. Amazon RDS. Option C. Amazon EC2. Option D. Amazon DynamoDB. E. Amazon Aurora. The correct answer is B. Amazon RDS. E. Amazon Aurora. Here is why. Amazon RDS supports managed PostgreSQL, and Aurora offers a managed PostgreSQL-compatible database engine. Why are the other options not correct? Athena is a serverless query service. C. EC2 requires the customer to manage the database software and operating system. D. DynamoDB is a NoSQL key value and document database. Exam tip. RDS supports PostgreSQL directly. Aurora provides PostgreSQL compatibility. Question number 177. An organization has a fleet of cargo ships. The cargo ships have sensors that collect data at sea, where there is intermittent or no internet connectivity. The company needs to collect, format, and process the data at sea and move the data to AWS later. What AWS service should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A. AWS Lot Core. Option B. Amazon Lightsail. Option C. AWS Storage Gateway. Option D. AWS Snowball Edge. The correct answer is D. AWS Snowball Edge. Here is why. Snowball Edge historically provided local storage and compute for disconnected locations and could later transfer the collected data into AWS. Why are the other options not correct? AWS IoT Core normally requires network connectivity to exchange data with AWS. B. Lightsail provides simplified cloud-hosted compute and application resources. C. Storage Gateway connects on-premises systems to AWS storage over a network. Exam tip. Snowball Edge was used for disconnected edge processing and later data transfer. Question number 178. An organization needs fully managed, highly reliable, and scalable file storage that is accessible over the Server Message Block (SMB) protocol. What AWS service can satisfy these requirements? Option A. Amazon S3. Option B. Amazon Elastic File System, Amazon EFS. Option C. Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. Option D. Amazon Elastic Block Store, Amazon EBS. The correct answer is C. Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. Here is why. FSx for Windows File Server provides fully managed, highly available, scalable file storage with native SMB support. Why are the other options not correct? Amazon S3 provides object storage. B. Amazon EFS provides NFS file storage for Linux-oriented workloads. D. Amazon EBS provides block storage for compute workloads. Exam tip. Use FSX for Windows file server when applications require managed SMB storage. Question number 179. An organization needs to centrally configure and manage Amazon VPC security groups across multiple AWS accounts within an organization in AWS organizations. What AWS service should the company use to satisfy these requirements? Option A, AWS Firewall Manager. Option B, Amazon Guard Duty. Option C, Amazon Detective. Option D, AWS WAF. The correct answer is A, AWS Firewall Manager. Here is why. Firewall Manager centrally applies and manages security group policies across accounts in AWS organizations. Why are the other options not correct? B, Guard Duty detects threats. C, Detective helps investigate security findings. D, AWS WAF filters supported web requests but does not centrally manage all VPC security groups. Exam tip. Firewall Manager centrally manages firewall policies across AWS accounts. You have completed part 3 of the CLF-C02 practice series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.